Hello. Sure. Good afternoon. Hello.
Hello. Father, good afternoon. Father Rector.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, Father. So we will start the program, maybe another few seconds. Father Bosca has also joined.
Yeah, can you see my video?
No, Father.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine now. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I think we are starting, Father. Now it's time.
Yeah.
2:30. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeba Jennifer, the MC of this webinar today. On this auspicious day, I take this privilege to welcome you on and all for this webinar on scope and challenges of women migrant workers post-COVID-19 pandemic. This national webinar is sponsored by National Commission for Women, New Delhi, which will be held for 2 days, today and tomorrow. Firstly, I would request Dr. K. Arukiraj, the webinar convener, to brief us about this webinar.
So a very good afternoon to one and all present here. And it's a great honor to conduct this national webinar on scope and challenges of women migrant workers, which is funded by National Commission for Women. When I wrote the proposal, I thought it will be a very good opportunity to give a chance for people to understand the plight of migrants, and especially migrant women. And this webinar aims to highlight the challenges of migrant women. When we talk about migration, we talk about interstate, inter-country, intrastate migration. When we talk about the migrant women workers' problems, and it's very important to understand their family life and the work life, and what are the various ways we can help, and how government is trying to address their needs, and how NGOs and corporate is trying to understand their needs and address their needs. And this is the objective of this program. And at present, around 82 are there, and 610 people had registered. We expect a good number, and it shows that people are interested to know the challenges of this migrant women workers, and discuss how we can help them to sustain their life and livelihood, so that the country, as a country, will be able to join with them in their plight and help them for a better life. And I'm very glad to have eminent people here, three speakers from Rajiv Gandhi Institute, from Bharatiyar University, and the secretary of college for the Dr. John Alex, and for the principal, Dr. Maria Raj, and the Bosco, and delighted to have them all, and expecting this webinar to give us a lot of insight and ways how we can help them and support them in all possible ways. Thank you so much, and excited. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for briefing the highlights about this webinar. Now, I would request Reverend Dr. John Alexander, SDB, the Secretary of Sacred Heart College, Tirupattur, to welcome the gathering.
Good afternoon to everyone. Am I loud enough and clear? Loud and clear? Dr. Arukiraj?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So a warm welcome to Sacred Heart College, Tirupattur. Tirupattur is one of the new districts that has been established in the state of Tamil Nadu. I'm given to understand that the participants are not just here locally, but national wide. There are participants, so I warmly welcome all of you. I'm joining here from Sacred Heart College, from the rector and secretary's office. And ours is a 70-year-old college, 70. And there are 5,000 students and 15 departments. And the Department of Social Work, which organizes this webinar on the plight of the scope and challenges of women migrant workers post-COVID-19 pandemic situation. The Department of Social Work is one of our best departments, flagship department, we can say, that has been doing a lot of pioneering work in understanding the social realities of our state and our country, India. And many important professors have been part of this. So I only congratulate the department, the HOD and Dr. Arakiraj and other faculty members who have spearheaded this important webinar and research program on trying to understand the situation of women migrants, especially here in India. And also I'd like to appreciate the fact for the principal has been encouraging and supporting the wide efforts of the department. So I warmly welcome all of you for a very happy learning experience because every time a social worker approaches the society and tries to understand, should go into the details. And the purpose of this research program and webinar is for this. And we have good speakers. My role here is only to welcome and introduce the first speaker. The other speakers will be properly introduced as and when they have their sessions. Now, I am really happy that Father Francis Bosco, the director of Bosco Migrant Services, Chennai, is here to give us the inaugural address. I have known Father, both, now we have grown together, but he is a very passionate social worker. He is both an academician as well as a practitioner. That's what makes Father Francis Bosco a very unique personality in the field of social work. He himself is an alumnus of our social work department, but after having studied here, he has really contributed to the tribal development works in Javadi Hills. He has been there for many years, getting involved in the lives and livelihood issues of the people there, and has really been spearheading number of development projects, especially understanding the capacities, local capacities of the tribal people and trying to get a number of projects. But more importantly, what I really like about Father Bosco is that he is always very conscious of the rights of the poor people. And that's why, besides social work, he is also a professional lawyer who goes around understanding the rights of poor people and trying to represent and himself both in High Court as well as in different district courts, trying to help people to gain their rights. And besides doing this, he has been in a number of other places working for poor people for the educational as well as social upward movement. So it is only right that Father has graciously accepted when I requested him personally, Father, we are having a national seminar on the migrants and especially women migrants, because recently together with Father, I had published a small work, and I thought of no other person to write something and tell the society about the plight of women, especially during this pandemic period. And that was, Father was the first person that I could think of. And he beautifully wrote his own experiences and involvement with the migrant workers during this COVID-19 pandemic situation. And sharing that came from out of his own experience. So we warmly welcome you, Father. And we are delighted that you are part of this national seminar, both by way of your expertise as well as of your experience, and more importantly, your passion to help poor people to get their rights and come up in their life. So, dear Father, we warmly welcome you on behalf of Sacred Heart College and the entire the webinar team, the professors and students and all the participants. We appreciate your work, but we want you to continue to enlighten us through your words and your wisdom. Welcome, dear Father, and I wish all the participants of this webinar a very happy learning experience. Thank all of you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father
Thank you,
Alex.
Father, for your warm welcome address. And now I request Reverend Father Francis Bosco, STP, to give the inaugural address. Welcome you, Father.
Thanks, Father Secretary of the College, Sacred Heart College, Father John Alex, Father Andrew, and Father Principal, and Professor Dr. Arikiraj for giving me this opportunity to learn with you. Good afternoon to all. I am happy to be present with you all and look forward to listening to newer possibilities to reach out to the scope and challenges of post-COVID women migrants. In the beginning itself, I like to pose a question to trigger. Why we are not able to see any women migrants returning? I have been working with migrants for interstate and intrastate. I was involved in sending migrants to the designated states during COVID by Shramik trains, private buses, ships, and even by flight. I have witnessed the tragedy of women being waiting for days to get a seat, to get a place for the travel, and to get accommodation in the shelter camp with their children. No, very difficult, especially in the buses and the trains, in the railway stations also. No, very, very difficult. Many men migrants have come back by flight back or by train. But I have not seen single women migrant returnees. Why? The reason that census tells us that from 2001 to 2011, female migration more than doubled from around 4 million to 8.5 million. In November 2020, recently, 8 months after the lockdown began, and 5 months after the phased reopening of all the industrial estates and factories and other things, there were still 13.5 million fewer people out of that 68 million men and 6.7 million women in the labor force. This means that 13% of women had dropped out of the labor force. Of the 6 million women displaced from the labor force during this period, 2.3 million were rural women, while 4.4 million were urban women. Why? What happened to the women labor force? That's why this 2 days of national workshop has been arranged, I think so. Often women are the ones who bear the burden of the family. But the post-COVID-19 shows a different scenario. Women who work in the informal sector, home-based workers, domestic workers, construction workers, petty retailers, and textile and garment factory workers, beauty salon, spa, service providers, housekeeping in the manufacturing sector, and constructions have lost jobs. Women pay the highest price during any major economic shock. It has been more during COVID. The hit on women, especially migrant women, are very high. The memories of anguish, distress, and anger experienced during COVID have made migrant women not to return to the work. Inadequate mobility, safety, lack of childcare options, disparity in wages in the designated states or in the intra-migration in their own cities or in the rural sites were restricting women from seeking work. I would like to share some of the 4 instances which happened during the COVID. I think I am just thinking whether I have seen for an example I have chosen this for. There may be many incidents why women are still stubborn. I come to call stubborn is a wrong word, or facing this challenge whether to return or not for the livelihood, for the jobs. I like to share that pressured the COVID pandemic incidents pressured women migrants heavily hit while confronting it. They confronted, but they had faced a lot of traumas. The first one was there is no data politics. People are playing with no data politics. Already, men migrants are not included in the data. Worse, it is women. Migration women working data or registration remains a classified information and it is not disclosed. And the e-video of the child and his dead mother at railway station in Bigaz, Musafur. A child tries to wake his mother up has been widely shared on social media. And it is one of the most tragic visual evidences of what the women migrants are undergoing while migrating for work. I think these are the scenes which makes women migrants to think twice. This daughter of India has died of starvation, dehydration, and extreme need. This is one of the incidents. The second I will go for is sexual harassment in the work sites. It is true that there are people, women working in construction, brick chambers and all, they work in a big number. But there are also places where people are chosen in a small number. For example, Namakkal district. If you take Salem district, if you take Dindigul district in Tamil Nadu, there are a lot of farms, the poultries, where a family is called for a work, to look in for work. And that incident I would like to share. 5 migrant workers from Mandya of Madhya Pradesh state being forcefully detained by the owner of Shiva Plastic Factory in Kaknachipuram of Dharmaburi district in the state of Tamil Nadu. Ishwar Prasad, age 25, and his wife Bombi Durva, age 21 years, has been working in the Shiva Plastic work for a meager salary of 12,000 per month and moreover. Only half of the amount was paid to them, and they had not received salary for the previous 3 months. The family has registered in the district collectorate for his return back to Madhya Pradesh during this corona, without seeking the permission of his owner Shiva. This has angered the owner and the contractor, the Bhaskar, the supervisor, who have not only beaten Ishwar Prasad, and his wife late night was also abused. You know what the banner they paid? The owner has also lodged a false complaint that he has stolen rupees 50,000. This is an incident happened. We rescued this whole family with the help of Dharmaburi Social Work College with Father Samson. The third incident I like to share is bonded laborers. Women migrants are kept in bondage, especially in brick chambers and brick kilns. It also happened. I witnessed it and I rescued this family. GDM brick chamber, Pudupakam, Puchiathipattu, Tiruvallur district, at 350 Orissa laborers, families and children working and living in that site. Laborers decided to get back to their home state, Orissa. Owner also accepted. But on the next early morning, when they were leaving at early morning 3 o'clock, they have to walk till Tiruvallur station, imagine, with all their things and all. When they were about to leave the chamber, they were beaten and tortured by 50 thugs and they were not allowed to go. The girl Mansi is from Orissa and she's continuing as my volunteer in Mansi in Orissa. Sorry, the name Mansi. She's in Orissa and she's helping me whenever any migrant coming, returning, or even to do the data there. The girl Mansi spread the news to the world outside for the eventual rescue. I think the brick chambers, no people have returned from Orissa. Many people come to Tiruvallur district and Kanjipuram district. Nobody came. Only Tamilians are coming from our own Tamil Nadu. Intrastate migrants are coming. But these women, the families are not entering it. The last incident, death, injury, accident. This is not at all a matter for a government or for the employer or the contractor, especially when it occurs for women. This is also another chamber, brick chamber, Kartigeyan chambers, one, Sudagar, Valudalingmedu, Nairu, Panchayat, Tiruvallur district. Manjari and Kaladi from Odisha, both the girls were staying with their mother at the brick chamber, very young girls. Some workers were called at 7 a.m. early morning to shift the bricks from the chamber to the lorry. These two girls, usually girls are not used for loading. These two girls also were there in the team. The side wall collapsed and the bricks fell on these two girls and they died on the spot. It's very tragic, especially when the death occurs for women or young girls. The employer or the contractor immediately tried to sack them back to their source stage. I think these are all the incidents. If you see, I think the people, women are just still thinking whether to get back, go back and face all these traumas. And last thing I would like to share is on this challenges, new labor codes, the controversial new labor codes. The government might have seen the suffering of the migrants faced during this pandemic. Their promising dream for the informal laborers, especially women in the new labor code, is silent. Nothing is about the women. No inclusion of domestic workers. Already they have no work. All this more than a year. They are not allowed in their houses for the work. And also late night working. There is a clause. There's a clause in the new labor code. Working with consent from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. This what is consent? You should not allow women to work at the late night. See how people are preparing code for the sake of women welfare and the wellness, well-being of the women. The threshold for creches is 50 or more employees. Why? What happened to only one lady working in a factory in a small establishment? That baby is not a baby. If there is only 50, there should be a creche. Maternity leave benefits to have only if she works for 80 days. That all informal workers are, especially women workers, informal workers are almost more than 90%. Imagine if these people are not able to enter into the courts, how they will. No special attention or provision to interstate migrant women in the labor codes. I think women migrants might have realized that the government, judiciary, or the society has no sense of respect towards a dignified living in the designated states. Either the source states or the destination states has nothing to offer towards their decent employment and decent living and safe working conditions. Thanks. I would like to listen to the eminent people here for their on this topic of scope and challenging of the women migrants amidst this post-COVID pandemic situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Father, for your inaugural address. As we have done with inaugural address, we are going to start with session 1. So, I now invite Dr. Clayton Michael Fonseca, faculty member of Social Work Department, Sacred Heart College, to introduce the speaker, Dr. P. Shivakumar. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Pleasant afternoon to one and all gathered here. It gives me great honor and privilege in welcoming the resource person for today's program, Dr. P. Shivakumar, from the Department of Development Studies, Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development, Sri Perumbudur, Tamil Nadu. He's a versatile academician and a great person. He is a postdoctoral fellowship from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Delhi. He's also been associated with UNESCO, Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education and Peace. He's been a part of the Commonwealth Youth Program London, a part of the Center of Development Studies and the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, ICPR, for various research projects. Dr. P. Kumar was also engaged as a researcher and a key trainer for several years. He has published a number of papers in journals, books, and trainings. He was a coordinator of the government and citizen engagement platform at Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Youth Development, constituted by the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India. He has represented the Government of India to prepare an action plan for BRICS on development and entrepreneurship during the BRICS Youth Summit 2016. He has also represented the Government of India for preparation of SARC Youth Charter and Action Plan in the year 2014. He was a member of the drafting committee of the Tamil Nadu State Youth Policy. He is also an expert group member on gender, youth and migration subcommittee of UN Solutions Engage. A pleasant afternoon to you, sir. It's indeed a great honor and privilege in welcoming you to be a part of this program. I hand over the session to you to take the first session on situations of women migrant workers post-COVID-19 pandemic. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for elaborate presentation. I think based on the revised schedule, I have 45 minutes of presentation. Arugya, can you please confirm?
Yes, you can go about 40 minutes, sir. Yeah.
Okay,
45
fine.
minutes,
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah. So without losing any introductory remarks, let me start with the presentation. I think can you permit me to share my screen? Or because I have to open my PPT. Arokiraj?
I can hear you, sir. I can hear you.
Yeah. So maybe, or I have to share with you. I mean, whatever is possible. I just need to open my presentation.
Yeah. You are unable to share, sir?
No, it is the host has disabled screen sharing.
Okay. Just hold on.
Okay. Anyway, you can.
I'll just
permit me. Meanwhile, let me have a brief introductory words. I think this is a right opportune for institutions like Sacred Heart College to a webinar on women migrant workers, and particularly as the inaugural address. I mean, the resource person mentioned about the plight of women migrants, which is being missing in the narratives of the dominant, migration stories in India. It's a true. Migrants themselves are, underrepresented as well as misrepresented. But among this category, again, woman as gender as a section is, it is completely missing. There is no narratives about, women's plight. Even during the lockdown, we could not, see any kind of, the welfare measures addressing to the towards the women migrants. I'll just briefly go through. Share some of the inputs which we have conducted. Studies for UNICEF in Tamil Nadu on the impact of COVID-19 on women. The migrants in India. But of course, I have just taken up a small portion of the status paper prepared for UNICEF to focus on women migrants issue.
So you can try now.
Right. Let me check. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, fine. I hope it is visible to all of you.
Yeah, it's fine, sir.
It's visible,
That's visible.
Yeah. Fine. Thank you. Okay. Fine. So, I have changed my title or, restructured this title to bit, this is the title of the chapter which I am, jointly writing with the Professor Rajan as well as with Ranjini. It will be published by Routledge in few months' time. Because this title is the most, apt one to me. Okay. I hope I'm audible. Am I right?
You're audible, sir.
Okay, fine. Great. Okay. So, this uncertainty or the walk towards uncertainty is going to continue by looking into the, the situation of the migrants. So the migrant dilemma in times of COVID-19, I don't think that this dilemma happened because of COVID-19. So I'm just going to focus on the gender component in this, this presentation. So I have hardly 30 to 35 minutes of remaining time can be used for discussion if it is, permitted by the organizer. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this, or trying to do in this 30 35 minutes time, to give a scenario about the pre-COVID situation as well as COVID situation and some of the policy measures which needs to be, taken up by the concerned authorities. So we know that, the unemployment scenario in India, how far, the unemployment has contributed to the concern of migrants. Also, it promoted, uh, uh, I will say that distress migration. It's not only about. I'm not talking about safe migration, or I'm not talking about migration from an international perspective. But the current unemployment scenario also has hugely contributed to the so-called distress migration. We will look into it based on the whatever survey, whatever government survey, or whatever private agency survey or estimations, we will see how this, this is looming a larger issue. And contemporary labor migration service gender. How do we look at this labor migration from the contemporary scenario with a perspective on gender lens? And what was the occupation pattern of female migrant workers after migration? Particularly, I will be sharing only one or two slides on that because this this perspective of occupational pattern was greatly dealt by Center for Women's Development Studies in their national report, which is available in public domain. But I'll take only one or two slides to just focus on the highlight of the problems. And same is applicable to the last migration. I mean, what was the last migration and what pattern was that followed by them? And how this occupational shift of migrant women and social category of migrant women, is changing. And the remaining portion will be focusing on the COVID-19 perspective, where how these migrant women were. It is actually a missing narrative. It is a truth that it is completely something like we never talked in public about the women migrants, their issues. Of course, there were small voices from concerned civil society organizations and certain rescue agencies were it was shared with you. And the predominant category of the most vulnerable women and the labor migrants and social security. But I'm not going to cover the labor codes, including social security codes, because it's another elaborate topic which needs to be discussed in detail. So my presentation may not be covering into the, but at least let us look into the social security schemes and how these schemes were having some of the misses and lapses. And the relaxation of labor laws. It was already mentioned. I'll be giving you some snapshot about the labor laws and the trade union perspectives. And finally, on policy measures. So all these perspectives are as a result of some of the papers which is already published, some of the papers which is about to be published. For example, we know that very recently Springer has come out with a volume on migration and COVID-19, which me along with the other scholars have contributed a paper on labor migration in India, which is available in public domain, which of Indian Journal of Labor Economics and other papers. So predominantly this entire presentation, I would like to acknowledge the support given by UNICEF in preparing a status paper on impact of COVID-19 on internal migrants in India, which will be published in the 2021. So this is the summary or background of the entire presentation, which I'll be focusing on the next few minutes. So starting with this employment scenario, if you look into the overall unemployment, we can see if you look into the past few decades from 1999, 2002 till 2018, the first, the three NSS rounds, which talks about employment and the ratio between, male and female, and the Labor Bureau. So first, 5 rounds, which is being given, our statistics is given by government. And the last one is about Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy, a private agency, last two. But even whatever the survey or whatever the enumeration we look, we can see there is a huge, gap between male and female unemployment. And, this is particularly interesting that if you look into the statistics related to migration, we know that female migration is outnumbering, just like now the introductory speaker has mentioned, it is outnumbering male migration, but we beautifully captured, or, we had hit their contribution only in the name of marriage migration. So we may say that, women are having higher number because of marriage migration. But, the survey is failing to capture the contributions by the women migrants after marriage. Not that all migrants are settling in their home after marriage. We know that it is, I'll give you this, some of the other survey details where, most of the migrants are going for paid domestic work and some construction sector, all such things. But still, the enumeration on migration, particularly on female migration, was concealed in the name of marriage migration, and their contribution to the economy was almost silent. Actually, that's one interesting feature which, I felt that there needs to be a detailed, methodology needs to be detailed, elaborative enough to capture the female migrant. So far, it is not capturing. That's the truth. Okay, now, yeah. See this migration as such, or particularly from the gender perspective, we know that it is a predominant feature in the world of work. But, the structural disarticulation between economic growth and labor migration, there is a problem, or migration paradox, which scholars used to call. Because, most migration indicators are measuring the stocks of migrant population and severely under enumerate migration flow. See, this fact is very much visible when we had faced the COVID-19 pandemic and the problems related to migrant type, because we most of the measures are interested in the stocks of migrant population, but severely under enumerate migration flows. So even now we don't have a proper database to understand the migration flows, though we are having a certain scanty survey result or certain information which is being collected by the agencies, both at sending as well as receiving places. So we are having a problem. This is the reason which resulted in the migrant pandemic, I should say. And the lifetime migrants are adequately represented. Look at the international scenario, whether male migration or female migration, it is being somewhat adequately represented. But in the short term, seasonal and circular migration is inadequately measured, or we don't have proper actual data available with us. Then, this informal nature of employment, Indian economy predominantly, depending on the informal sector employment, we have very hard, few formal structure, roughly 8% or less than 8%. More than 90% of economy is depending on informal nature of employment. And this overwhelming proportion of migrants into informal economy is another issue, particularly after the decline of the agriculture. So there is a blurring of sharp distinction between labor supplying and receiving regions. This is also one of the reason, which has resulted in overcrowded or overpopulation. Some sectors are compelled to accommodate more people, and there is some kind of conflicts, which we'll be discussing in the coming slides. Okay, now when we look into the conventional way of conceptualizing this labor migration, it is clear that it is inadequate to represent all forms of mobility of labor. Then the upward occupational mobility, it is actually absent, virtually absent. There is no occupational mobility based on the nature of work done by a migrant, and it is more true in the case of a female migrant. This occupational mobility is another major reason that most of the vulnerable sections of the populations are compelled to be in this sector. Because that's another issue which needs to be dealt in elaborately, because as rightly mentioned that we are yet to be seen that how these newly formulated labor codes are going to look at these issues. Then several occupations in major receiving regions are becoming migrant-centric, whether it is domestic or informal transport. All these things are gradually becoming a migrant-centric work. So since it is becoming a migrant-centric work, most of the employers are not concerned about safety. So that's another issue where safety and privacy of the women migrant workers are always put into question. And the institutional mechanisms and agency system also ensure a steady flow of seasonal migrants to cater the implicit demand for migrants in receiving regions. Another major issues to be addressed, and we know this capitalist penetration how has resulted in the mobile population and who are in search of some means of livelihood. So it's something like an overall perspective on what is to be looked into the or the contextual situation of migration from the perspective of gender. Now, this is what I was sharing with you based on a CWTS survey, where the occupational pattern of women migrants. Right. So we can see that predominant section of women migrant workers are in domestic sector or in construction sector, as well as paid domestic work, which is live in as well as live out, where they live with the employer and they're coming and going also. And there are several other area or activities which is being taken up by the women migrant migrants. So when we look into these occupational pattern, and predominantly it is an informal economy, and we know the social security provisions are almost absent for them. There is no social security provision which is existing to cover all these women migrant population, except the some of the schemes available under the construction sector. But even in that case, the data shows that the predominant resources are being unspent or unutilized. Even during the pandemic, the Union Labour Minister was asking to, tell out the money collected for the welfare of the migrants, but it is not actually spent, except a few exemptions like states like Kerala as well as Tamil Nadu. Predominant states are yet to do any kind of welfare activities for the migrants, particularly the money collected from the construction sector. Then manner of last migration. We know that predominant section of migrant or female migrants are traveling with family members, but this trend is changing. Though this survey was taken up in some 4 or 5 years back, the recent studies shows that the female migration is going alone without male company is also increasing. This is a new trend which is visible for the last 3 to 4 years. where female migrants are in search of better employment positions, and they travel alone. So, if this is the background where we are talking about the so-called, migration or migrant phenomena from a gender perspective. And another interesting, point to be noted is that there are very less studies, we focus on female migrants, particularly on sector-specific issues of the female migrants. So if you look into the existing literature available on this direction, we can see that occupational shift through migration leading to greater concentration of women in a relatively narrow band of occupations. That means, women are, compelled to take a narrow band of occupations. There are no predominant choices with the law for social advancement. What happens is that they are compelled to take up occupations with which is very limited in nature, and they don't have any scope for social advancement. See, when a male migrant worker, he may be working as a as a person, unskilled person. Later, he may get a skilled, and he may have some opportunity, though it is very limited. Still, opportunity for male worker to advance to our employment skills by him, whether he is working in construction. Even such ability is not available for female migrants. So there is very less scope for social advancement. Then more medium-term and long-term migration among women workers from upper caste communities, accompanying relatively greater levels of diversification of their employment. This is one of the findings as given by CEWDS team, that when you look into the social category, some medium-term and long-term migration of women from upper caste communities are having relatively greater levels of diversification. But more, there is the concentration of migrant women workers from the historically disadvantaged and stigmatized communities, particularly on scheduled castes and tribes, in short-term and particularly circular migration. That this is what I said, it is concentrated for hard manual labor with little scope for social advancement. So there is no scope for social advancement, and it is again concentrated with historically disadvantaged communities. It is easy to stamp. It is easy to stamp them, and to that's what's happening. And distinctive movement towards concentration of women in paid domestic work, particularly through rural to urban migration, and which cuts across all caste, tribes, and communities. This is also true. Cutting across all caste, there is a concentration of women in paid domestic work. So, and this also even in the textile work or textile-based factory production, and it also appears relatively less characterized by caste features. So, this is the survey done by CWDS points out that if you look into the paid domestic work and some other sectors like textile, it cuts across all communities. But in other areas like hard manual labor, it is being concentrated in the social category of SC and ST population, and very less scope for social advancement. Okay, so now let us focus on the the state of being a migrant during COVID time. We know that Indian migrant workers struggles, particularly on women, were overlooked or trivialized the gender perspective of it. We never, even the first period of lockdown, we have been talking about migrant crisis, but very less or small voice on women migrants, because we categorized that migrants can include women also, and their problem is not distinct from male problem. But actually, this is a wrong concept to capture the migrant problem as a whole, because the experience and impact of COVID-19 on women migrant workers are different from their male counterparts. But this narrative is actually missing in the mainstream media also. Women outnumber men in internal migration in India. It is identified as part of marriage or associational migration. This means, we always, that's what I said in the beginning, that in the census, we say that women are double the number of migrants, but their status after marriage migration is highly underestimated. There is no enumeration available, or there is no data available, the status of employment after marriage migration. That means the woman, many women report marriage as the reason for migration, but the occupational pattern of women migrants after marriage is not being captured, even though they may immediately enter into jobs in the newly migrated area. But this pattern has not been captured, or it is not visible in the official database. So we predominantly we say that higher number of internal migration happening in India. Predominantly it is female migration, and the reason is marriage. But what happened to the women migrants after marriage, about the occupational pattern, about the employment which they have taken up, is actually missing in our database. So the the around 66% of work done by women is unpaid all over the world. This is the report given by World Economic Forum, about India, and over 90% of women in the labor force work in the unorganized sector. This is also true fact, which is known to all of us. See, the rate of female labor force participation is always on low. And of course, the government was contemplating on providing incentives to industries for increasing the workforce participation rate, particularly focusing on gender. But every disaster has an unequal gender impact, and this is clearly visible in COVID-19 disaster. Right. 4 in every 10 working women lost the job, because they are the first one being hired. Being fired. That means more than 17 million women were left out without any job suddenly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we know that reverse migration is already happening due to the overnight loss of livelihood of migrants. And it is altering the dynamics of development and reset migration equations for women. This is a fact that actually it is happening due to this pandemic. Unless we focus predominantly on these gender-based migration and to have some policy prescriptives, this is going to affect the development equations which we have been focusing or promoting, particularly on gender-based equality. So this unprecedented global economic depression, or which is sometimes people are predicting that it is going to be more severe. Again, it is going to result in feminization of loss of jobs and widen the gender gaps to an exacerbated level. This is one of the problems which the status of migrant women in the post-COVID times is going to face. Then, in our study, we are focused on the 3 categories of people, particularly on women migrants. The left out woman migrant due to male migrant. This is another category which is actually silent. We have several stories on male migrants, but what happened to the left out women due to male migration? This is also actually silent in our narratives. Particularly, from rural to urban area where the male migration is predominant, living their spouse, children, and extended family, it had actually a structural and cultural constraint to the left out woman. They had to take up the responsibility of female-headed households, and it is actually increased the responsibility inside and outside the house. and often engaging in traditional occupation or agriculture and allied activities, the man left behind. In addition to the care work or unpaid work, which is being continued by the women, people who are left out. And interestingly, such women are neither part of any welfare schemes of government or migration policies. We have not captured the plight of women who are left alone due to male migration. One major category, which we have highlighted in our study. Second is the woman who migrated with spouse for better labor opportunities. This is the only category of women which was visible in the migration narratives. During the COVID-19 crisis. So it has extensively reported on enormous number of men and women walking hundreds of kilometers and their plight. At least some kind of discussion has generated about women migrants, those who travel with their male counterpart, and all these issues were relatively covered and captured the attention of the people. But the third category, which is also important, single woman migrant laborers, we are silent. The mainstream traditions and norms devalue women working outside domestic boundary and moving alone in stranger places. Because of this devaluation, we underestimate their importance. The single woman migrant laborers who bypassed these constraints and migrated alone has faced all problems during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, some of the survey has highlighted the, problems faced by the single woman migrant workers. And of course, there are some scanty attempts by small agencies or civil society organizations, but it was not enough actually. A large number of women ranging, from living domestic help to women working in bricklanes or construction sites actually affected with this problem. And during the pandemic, many among them pertaining to northeastern states were harassed and targeted for their looks. And their probable return to the native places was never covered in the media. And the workplaces considered to be danger zones for COVID infection are going to be locked down. And again, because of these COVID-19 restrictions, suddenly they were asked to vacate their place and without having any place to go. So this was a major, predominant category. And actually, in coming days, we have to address these, single woman migrants, because, they are also going to be the backbone of the economy. And we may say they are the backbone of the economy, but they live in the margins of the economy. They are contributing to the center of the economy, but we are placing them at the boundary of the economy for their welfare. So this is a major concern which has to be addressed by whatever agencies. Now look into the, I'll just stop with some of the social security provisions and the lapses. Of course, government has, announced a lot of initiatives and a lot of, the welfare measures were implemented. No doubt there were a lot of welfare measures implemented, but the problem, because of the lack of proper enumeration, what happens is that several migrants were left out. For example, we know that government has supplied food grains to the people or to the PDS system, all these things. But scholars like Dees and Ritika Khera, who has extensively studied on PDS system, argued that because of the lack of proper data, over 100 million people will be excluded from the coverage of PDS. Because the PDS is looking into the National Food Security Act, and they are focusing on the data, or they are allocating food grains based on the data of 2011 census. So the government is having data of 2011 census, and they're providing food grains, all these things based on the census 2011. But we are in 2020 or 2021. See, just I'll give you a small snapshot of the lapses. For example, if you have a population of 2011 population in Uttar Pradesh 152.1 million, look into this 2020, it has gone to 180. That means there is an estimated under coverage of 28.0, and this is as a whole in these 5 states alone. It was more than 100 million people were left out from the government welfare programs, because we don't have proper database to be updated, and these we never look into the change in the enumeration. So most of the people are left out, and predominantly again migrant population of got severely affected with this. Now after to revive the economy, we know that the government has started into giving a lot of incentives to the industries, and they started focusing on the reopening the industries and giving a lot of incentives. So states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Gujarat, all these states have uh, in the process of changing or suspending labor legislation. They have relaxed all types of labor regulation, so that more activities can take place. So this is a snapshot of the labor regulation, where the working hours was increased from 48 to 78 hours, 72 hours, and the wages also and the time period also was given. But the problem is that for these 3 months, 4 months, all labor regulations were suspended or relaxed, so that more activity can happen. Again, migrants were on the receiving end of these problem. So there is no rule is or there is no rule is applicable, or the existing rule is relaxed, so that more number of working hours can be permitted to the industries. Of course, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan has withdrawn the notification pertaining to the working hours, but several states have come out with the relaxation of the labor rules. So this has resulted that we know that internal migrants in India are not categorized into any kind of trade union activity. The year 2012, that is the available data, 9.18 million took membership, but this 9.18 million is only 1.9% of the total working population. Of course, there is a slight improvement, but not very promising improvement. That means the presence of the trade unions in the informal sector, even otherwise, is minimal, or it is not visible. So out of 450 million informal workers, only 3.5 million workers are organized in various trade unions, and this representation is hardly 0.77% of total informal workers. So this is the status. Now, if you look into this low level of representation of union and focus on informal sector, we know that trade unions are unable to reach out to any internal migrants in India. They were unable, or it was a failure of the trade unions also to reach out to the migrants, because it is yet to be categorized into a particular activity for the trade unions. Now, the hiring practice through contractor has ended the relationship between employer and employee, and that's another result that why there is not trade union activism. I'm not telling we should have a trade union activism, but at least some welfare measures by some agencies could have been done if there is a limitation by the government. So this resulted in the stagnation of the employer-employee relations, and the freedom to choose employment is almost not available. Now, look into the Factories Act, where Factories Act, the existing Factories Act was made into so feeble that it is relevance is being questioned. See, that this is the data which shows between the year 85 to 2011 number of inspections carried out by the labor department to understand any labor violation is there. We can see that it is labor inspections at factories are almost not at all visible or nil. And this is also another, instance where we can see a lot of labor violations which is visible. So I'll just go, focus on another 2 or 3 slides to, give some of the policy recommendations or measures which we have, recommended through the status paper submitted to UNICEF. See, these employment provisions available locally for migrants needs to be strengthened in order to reduce the gap between income at source and destination. Local income generation is very important, where NREG activities can be expanded the scope so that we can have more number of employment, to capture the distress migration. The out migration destination states will temporarily benefit as more employment opportunity will become available for natives. But this is a temporary phenomena, and we need to be really cautious that the poorer states will face labor supply. For example, a migrant who is working in Kerala from UP or Bengal, they will be left out, and people or local population will be having more opportunity, because here also the natives also being impoverished. But look at the poorer states like UP, West Bengal, Bihar. There will be a larger labor surplus, and the specific policy should be there to address the problem, because there will be temporary benefit to the native population, but this benefit is temporary in nature. On the other hand, the poorer states will face the labor surplus problem, and there needs to be separate policy measures for this. TDS rations, we know that One India, ration has been implemented or going to be rolled out completely in 2021. Definitely, it is going to be helpful to the migrant population also. And the institutional mechanism for supporting the migrants by cash transfers and extending food subsidies needs to be, strengthened to a more deeper level. And it is a well-known fact that the lack of comprehensive data on migrants complicate any relief package. Just now we had seen that how the food grain distribution has left out the 100 million people. Same thing, but there is a comprehensive data is absent. So we have to understand that government cannot always look for or enumerate data. We need to assign this with the credible agencies, so that whoever government is having confidence, it should be left out to the credible agencies, so that we have a proper updated database. So the monopoly of government over data collection procedure needs to be extended to credible agencies, including civil society organizations. So such organizations may offer greater reach and assist the government in unearthing accurate data that makes better policy interventions. So that's all from my end. I hope that I have done justice to the time limit also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening us with the situations of women migrant workers. Now over to Arukirat, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, very good evening. It was a very enriching session with a lot of information, and it shows how much you are into the subject. I know, when we talk about migration, you have a lot to share, and it was really a lot of insightful session. A few questions to interact with you.
Yeah,
sir.
right now I can see in the chat box. Okay, you are
just,
going to be selecting the questions, Arugiraj?
You can see them.
Okay, okay,
There are few only I have taken from YouTube also.
Yeah.
There are some questions like, what are the impact of migration of young adolescents on the rural elderly parents during this pandemic? That's a question. How it
well, yeah. See, young adolescents migration is predominantly, for education purpose. Of course, you are talking about the migration as well as distress migration, where some of them are land up in the child labor also. See, if you look into the impact of such adolescents migration on elderly parents, we know this is another issue where the studies in this direction, particularly the so-called gerontology, has focused on the problems of aging and the migration. Actually, we don't have a proper policy prescriptive. There is no such policy prescriptive being offered by government so far. But the impact is, we know that there is a severe impact because of such a situation. There is no proper, healthcare facilities was extended to the elderly people who are left alone due to the, siblings migration. In Kerala, government has taken up a scheme, and this scheme is relatively successful. Maybe you can refer the details of the scheme is available in the Center for Development Studies website on migration, where they have taken up it as a pilot scheme, and it has been extended. And some of the panchayats in Pathanamthitta district are having very high success rate of addressing the problems of elderly population due to migration. Okay, now what would be the scope and challenge in skilling young women migrant as they could be no less literate? See, actually, this is a very important aspect. As I said, we actually underestimate the from one position to another position. Whereas, see, for example, look at a male migrant. He may join as a manual laborer in the construction sector. Sometimes he may move into the ladder as a mason or some other position or a supervisor. But if you look into the female counterpart, she may join as a manual laborer and she will remain as a manual laborer. Actually, this segregated discrimination needs to be addressed by the people who, particularly the industrialists as construction sector, along with the government. There is, as of now, there is no scope for such female migrants, but it needs to be highlighted as an important aspect so that they are also having wherever it is possible. I'm not telling it is possible for every sector, but at least we need to have attempt to bridge the gap between the gender discrimination needs to be addressed, because it has to be addressed. So otherwise, we will be missing the development equation, which we have been talking a lot.
Great, sir. So there is one question: how do the migrants can register their data so that the government can help them in case if they would like to do it? Is there any scope for them to register?
Yeah. See, actually, this has been taken up by the government. I think once the new labor codes are being rolled out, I was told, I'm not sure, I have not read any provisions under the labor codes, but the discussions are going on in the labor ministry, particularly in the states. For example, in 2017, the Ministry of constituted a panel headed by Partham Mukhopadhyay. I was also having an opportunity to attend some of the meetings convened by this committee. And this committee report has already submitted to the government in 2017 itself, which is available in public domain. They have identified 54 districts as highly migrant sensitive districts. And predominant districts are in Uttar Pradesh as well as Bihar. So, this needs to be further taken up. I was told that the government is contemplating further on to study this report so that some activities can be focused on the, migrants data. Otherwise, there is an existing provision, but the provision is never implemented. For example, the contractor is supposed to give all the information about migrants to the agency where the migrant is being placed. But it is not coming to the public domain, or it is not done by the so-called contractor. It is compulsory in my construction sector because government is collecting SS. I think 1% or 2% SS is being collected for their welfare. So migrant as such also, he or she also can make it compulsory that their details needs to be registered with the employer.
Yes, sir. I think a few questions are related to the next session. They have asked how government can do it like that.
Yeah.
I think we can come to this conclusion of this session, sir. It was a wonderful session, sir. A lot of information, and kindly share the PPT. I can share it with the participants.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot,
Okay,
as
fine.
always.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Over
Yeah.
to Jabba Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now looking forward for the second session, I now invite Dr. P. Selvam, faculty member of Social Work Department, Sacred Heart College, to address our next speaker, Dr. S.X. Laulina Littleshaw. Welcome you, sir.
So good afternoon to all. This is Dr. Selvam. At the outset, I would like to thank to the webinar team for giving an opportunity to introduce one of the resource persons of the webinar. I'm indeed happy to introduce Dr. F.X. Laulina Littleflower, who is going to discuss on a theme called Role of Welfare State on Women Migrant Workers During Post-COVID-19 Pandemic. Dr. Laulina Littleflower is the professor and head of the Social Work Department, Bardiyar University, Tamil Nadu. In 2004, she was awarded with a doctoral degree in social work by Bharatidasan University. She worked as lecturer for 12 years in Kaveri College for Women. In 2006, she visited Omania University, Sweden, under the Linnaeus Palm International Faculty Exchange Program. In 2008, she joined as a faculty member in the Department of Social Work, Bardiyar University. Her first area of teaching and research includes medical and psychiatric social work, adolescent mental health, life skill education, disability management, and geriatric social work. So far, she has guided 10 PhD and 20 MPhil scholars. She has published more than 35 research articles in reputed national and international journals. She has also edited 4 books in social work discipline. She has also coordinated capacity building programs such as National Action Plan for Drug Demand Reduction, National Program on Healthcare of Elderly under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, and a skill development program for rural women under the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. Apart from these credentials, she has also organized a number of national and international conferences and seminars. Once again, I thank and welcome Dr. Laulina ma'am. And without taking much time, I'm handovering the session to ma'am. Thank you.
Madam, am I audible? We can see your screen. You can go ahead with your presentation. Yeah, we can now see your presentation. But your voice is not audible, madam. No, the voice is very low. Madam, your voice is not audible. No, madam, it's not audible. No, it's not audible. Can you try with your mobile phone, madam, if not possible? Participants, kindly be patient. We are trying to sort out the technical issue. No, it's not audible, madam. The presentation is visible. Your voice is not coming. So I would recommend you can operate the PPT in the desktop. You can speak over the mobile phone. Not audible, madam. Not able to listen to you. You can share your PowerPoint to our email ID. You share email. Not audible, madam. Not able to listen to you. Madam, you can share the PowerPoint to the mail ID that I've sent to you by WhatsApp. Probably we can share it from this side. You can use the mobile phone to talk to me.
ask them to share. Now I will just listen to me whether I'm audible. Just listen to me. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me, isn't it? Okay, fine, fine. Okay, okay, I'm presenting now. Okay.
Clear, sir.
So, good evening, friends. I'm sorry about this technical difficulty.
Madam, can you be a little louder? Can you increase your volume,
I
please?
thank Dr. Arakiraj for having invited me to this 2 days conference. And I thank all the organizing committee members, convener, and the head of the department, Father Andrews, and everyone present here. And above all, dear participants, very good evening to all of you. So the title of my presentation is going to be the role of a welfare state on women migrant workers post-COVID-19 pandemic. And this presentation is going to be for 3 parts. I have divided my presentation into 3 parts. So the part 1 would be focusing on the introduction, and the part 2 would be focusing on the challenges and risks for women migrant workers, and part 3 will consist of the role of a welfare state post COVID-19 pandemic. So this is how I am going to present, and I hope I will be finishing within time. And maybe from the previous presentation, by this time you would have understood the meaning of the word migration and migrant workers, everything, but just a glance we'll go through, and then we will go to the next slide. So according to International Organization for Migration, it is an UN migration organization. This organization has not clearly defined what is migration. The term migrants not defined under international law, that is no universally accepted definition for migrant exists. And according to the International Labour Organization, ILO, it refers them as migrant workers or as migrant for employment. Means a person who migrates from one country to another with a view to being employed otherwise than his or her own account. Okay, so he's migrating himself from one country to another country only for the purpose of getting an employment. And also all these ILO conventions lay down the general obligation to respect the basic human rights of all migrant workers. And just and there is one more statistics you have to see here. This world statistics, how it gives us the account is that an estimation of 272 million international migrants, according to the International Organization of Migration 2019, and 136 million were women, while 26.1 million children are included in the 272 million international migrants. And some 100 million migrant women send remittances every year, amounting to half of the US dollar 601 billion sent in 2016. So there is a combination of statistics given here, you can understand. So actually what I'm trying to say here is that women are the major contributor of this remittances to our country. And Indian statistics, if you take, international migration accounts for a large population, almost 454 million, or 37 percentage of the population census 2011. And among this 37 percentage of the total population, 70.7 percentage of 70.7 percentage of the internal migrants are women. So that means out of this 454 million population, 70 percentage, almost 350 something, will be women. And the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on women migrant worker in situations of vulnerability are very severe. And COVID-19 could cause 25 million jobs to be lost globally, with women migrant workers, particularly, they are very much vulnerable. And again, women migrant workers around the world are on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this nature of women migrants They work in essential but low paid and vulnerable jobs as health and care workers, nurses, cleaners, and laundry workers. These are all the different occupations occupied by these women workers. And many of them are domestic workers. And migrant women disproportionately work in more precarious, insecure, and informal employment that receives low pay, and women are more likely to experience violence within workplaces, and migrant women, especially those working informally, face numerous difficulties, and COVID-19 pandemic has worsened their conditions, and global unemployment figures could rise by almost 25 million as a result of COVID-19. I have concluded that first part, introduction and statistics. Now I'm moving on to the challenges and risks of women migrant worker. The first challenge what I would like to talk about is this challenge, the loss of livelihoods. So here, the first challenge what we have already seen or witnessed and what the women migrant workers have faced, that I'm giving it here. So the global unemployment figures could rise by almost 25 million as a result of COVID-19, affecting the income security of women and migrant. And they are in the precarious conditions without formal employment contracts, and most of them are actually covered. They are not covered by labor laws. Employers are more ready to end their employment, citing economic decline caused by COVID-19 pandemic. So this has been quoted in ILO also in the year 2020, and we all have witnessed how many people they have lost their livelihood and how they have moved from one place to another place. What are all the conditions they were in when they were traveling or they are going back to their native? All that we have witnessed. And the next, if you see, what is the second important challenge that they have faced is that reduced remittances. So you can see that remittances are key for the survival of many households and communities all over the world. So COVID-19 pandemic has caused a global recession. No one can deny that. We all have witnessed once again the economic recession that happened the worldwide, and the most affected or the most seriously affected victims are women, because most of the remittances when women are making to their country or to their hometown is that that will be spent usually for two purposes. One is that educational needs and health and livelihood needs of the family members. So that is how they usually spend whatever they earn the money. They will spend on these two categories: educational needs of the children and health and livelihood needs of the families. So then the third important So third important challenge what they have faced is vulnerabilities. So that we have put it in general, vulnerabilities. You can see the past epidemic demonstrated migrant women and girls were heightened risk of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual exploitation and other abuses. Example, the Ebola. So when there was an epidemic occurred at Ebola, so people have faced a lot of migrants, and even in India, there was a study conducted and it was published in almost all the national dailies that the gender-based violence has increased and intimate partner violence and sexual exploitation, including child abuse, was on the rise. And it was almost quoted in all the dailies. And then if you see migrant women working in households, especially caring for children, the sick and the elderly face an increased risk of contracting the virus as they are likely to be in direct contact with person who may have COVID-19. That was another vulnerability they all faced. You might have seen that. And the person who was an UN Women Executive Director, Ms. Milambo, in her statement, she very clearly says that we need to end the exploitation, violence, and abuse that so many migrant women face and enable them to flourish as champions and change makers. So that is what we are supposed to do, because the statement came based on the statistics or based on the problems it has been it was been given in UN or it has been discussed in UN. And next, if you see the another challenge what they have faced is limited freedom of movement. And almost all of us would have experienced this limited freedom of movement, and that is to control this pandemic. But still, the problems are problems, and we all have faced the problems. Travel bans and restrictions prevented them from returning to their countries of origin as cross border travel becomes more complex and difficult. And similarly, women migrant workers who are unable to return to work due to travel restrictions, experiencing a complete loss of their livelihood in the absence of a social protection, as well as of their families who depend on their remittances. So, this is a very serious issue. And once again, as social worker or people who are in this field, you might have seen that how many people they have suffered, and including not only the migrant workers, we can include the organized sector people also, they have suffered. And including, I could quote, since now I'm looking after the colleges, I could see there are a lot of teachers who were jobless now and who were paid very minimum salary per month. All that has been happened, and for them also severe problems happened like this due to travel bans. And in the Times of India daily newspaper, you could have seen in the month of July 2020, the deaths occurred due to the following are the reasons because of which deaths have happened. Accidents due to due to walking or during migration, 299 deaths, and starvation and financial distress, deaths in Shramik trains. The trains were arranged for the migrant workers to go back to their, for their places, but unfortunately, the deaths happened during this also. And then alcohol withdrawal related deaths, exhaustion while walking or standing in queues, and quarantine center deaths, and deaths in crimes due to lockdown period, and it is not based on the communal violences, and police brutality or state violence that has happened because deaths, 12 number of deaths has happened, and unclassified almost 60 deaths have happened. So all these deaths are the reasons, maybe because of the travel bans and restrictions. And the next one, if you see, so lack of social protection and health care. So you can see here the important challenge, or the most important or significant challenge and risk what they all have faced is that migrant women in the informal economy have limited or no access to social protection, and healthcare and maternity protection were totally nil because they are excluded from contributory social insurance schemes. So that we need to understand that health insurance coverage is very, very low in our country, and that too as a part or a measure of social protection, it is not being extended to migrant workers, and because of which they faced a lot of problems. And women migrant workers lacking health insurance or with irregular migration status may be hesitant to comply with COVID-19 screening, testing, and treatment procedures due to fear of documentation checks by authorities and potential fines, sometimes arrest, sometimes detention, or sometimes even deportation. So all that would be leading to them to have a poor health coverage, insurance coverage for their health aspect. Then their sexual and reproductive health is compromised by a lack of health insurance and access to health care. This is once again, we need to talk much about this. The sexual and reproductive health is compromised due to this lack of insurance, and a lot of other health related issues because they are not covered under any of the health schemes. And I still remember there was a case like there in our state, Tamil Nadu, we have a state chief minister's comprehensive health coverage scheme where the health department people and even the doctors could, primary health center doctors could refer the patients to the other COVID-19 clinics, that means the centers where they can get free treatment. But unfortunately, even the health officials had their own reservation against these migrant workers, whether they should be treated under this particular scheme because they are not covered. So that is again a problem. And then now we will move on to the third part of this important presentation. So what is the role of a welfare state post COVID-19. So if you see, you can see here, this is what I was talking to you about. So a welfare state should be, how a welfare state should be. First and foremost, and that too when there is a pandemic like COVID-19, what is expected from the government is that ensuring comprehensive health services. So that means no one should be left from the services of the government regarding health. For example, I have quoted here, and you can see that I don't know what's happening in the picture. Some marks and all it is coming, which I'm not making. Maybe the organizers could check that what's happening there.
I'm just checking. I don't know how it is coming, madam. Someone.
Colombia, the country, they have permitted its next neighboring country, Venezuelan migrant population to access healthcare during the COVID-19 crisis. And also in Ireland, testing is available for all migrants regardless of their status, whether they are all belonging to Ireland, I mean that they are the citizens of Ireland or the neighboring country, it is regardless of all those problems, all those status, but still they have been given testing. The same way, Colombia also allowed its neighboring country people to have access to their healthcare facilities. But unfortunately, as I was mentioning previously, the same thing it is not happening in our country. So there is a scheme. It is called Chief Minister's Comprehensive Health Insurance Scheme, and under that scheme, there was a free corona treatment and intensive care treatment. All expenses were covered, including ventilator charges, then personal protective equipments, the nursing services, boarding charges, basic medical and laboratory tests, including drugs and disposables and doctor's fees, etc. It's a free isolation care. And but unfortunately, you see, all that has been recommended by the health officials, health department people, and other people. But unfortunately, this women migrant workers, whether they are included or not, it is still a question mark. But actually speaking, they were not included, and they should have full accessibility without any discrimination and affordability to comprehensive healthcare and treatment, and should have access to COVID-19 testing and including other health services, example sexual and reproductive health services. So that is very, very important, which never happened. Then the second important welfare state measure should be providing adequate information. So in almost all the meetings, usually they'll be saying there is a dashboard created where you can see the number of cases affected with positive and how many were discharged, how many were under treatment, where are all the quarantine wards are there, where and all the clinics are there, how many ventilators are available, all these details, and where and all the beds are vacant. So much information were given, but still, whether it reached I mean, the end users, we call them as the end users. That means these, including these migrant people, whether they have reached, it is a question mark. You see here, provide adequate information is the next important role of a welfare state. So they should be informing about their social protection rights and entitlements and how to access them, not only informing them about social protection rights, these are all the rights you have, or these are all the entitlements you have. It is not sufficient. Instead, or in addition to that, they should be helped in accessing these provisions. That is very, very important. And again, awareness about the preventive measures to reduce the risks of this contamination and transmission. And information in a language, the third important point here is information in a language that migrant workers can understand. Also, taking into account the number of illiterate workers for whom visual or auditory forms of communication may be required. So this is again a very, very important. I had an experience in our university. Once our students have organized an anti-tobacco movement, kind of a awareness program for the construction workers. And in Coimbatore, almost the construction workers, people are, majority of them are from this northeast or the Bihar, Uttarakhand, those state people. So our students, when they have approached to create awareness about the ill effects of tobacco, they found that the vernacular language of our students, Tamil, is not going to be very much effective on those people because they will not able to understand, or they may not be in a position to comprehend what we are trying to see. So students, what they have done is they have invited a doctor who can address in, bilingually with the migrant workers. That means he translated or he talked fluently with them in Hindi and they translate. So that is how it was a kind of a moment. All of them, they have burnt whatever the tobacco in the forms of the tobacco they were having, that has been burnt in front of the, the people. So what I'm trying to say is that information in a language that migrant workers can understand, that information should be shared. And that is very, very important. And they should also be informed about relevant COVID-19 response measures adopted by the authorities in the country of destination that may affect their employment, living, or travel conditions. So again, this is very, very important. The country of destination, whether they reach of their own country, and there what are all the travel condition it is being implemented by the country concerned, that has to be informed properly to this migrant workers, and especially women. Since we are focusing here on women, they should be given complete details or complete information about them, so that without problems they could have, if it has been happened, probably the deaths whichever I have explained to you in the previous slides, even that could have been avoided. Then guidance on how to send remittances digitally to help close the persistent digital gender gap. Always, and especially women, they feel, or sometimes they feel it is not possible for them to access the digital forms of remittances. That means not only going to the banks, now it is all changing. The scenario is changing, but still we could say that women are always having a hesitation while coming to this digital transformation, digital transactions and other things. So what happens here is that they were not able to remit their amounts through digital forms. So that gap, usually women, they have a hesitation. And again, this transaction should be done properly. So guidance on how to send, that has to be given properly. And the example I have given here, in Italy, Italy is an online Juma portal, Juma, Juma portal. It provides refugees and asylum seekers access to information in 15 different languages on COVID-19, including with respect to healthcare, movement restrictions, administrative, uh, administrative procedures and available services. So that is how they have done in Italy. Maybe probably like we should have also done that, so that it reaches the end users or the migrant women also. Then the other third important welfare state's role is that ensuring social protection. Just see here, universal access to gender responsive social protection measures to all migrants within or between countries. So the social protection measures, first of all, knowing about that, or the policies available for them, or all these should be very clearly defined, number one. And number two, accessibility, universal access to all this information is very, very important. And again, it is not only in our country, within country, that means between states, but also between countries it would have been done. Then migrant domestic workers who have lost their jobs, the states needs to provide the same
Madam, could you be a little more louder, madam?
protection,
Thank you.
including unemployment benefits, sick leave, income support, and wage subsidies that they offer to their nationals. So this should have been taken into consideration for social protection, and to take measures providing tangible help that migrant women need right now. For example, direct cash transfers in almost all the debates in, or in all the discussions. Ultimately, the economists, they have come to the conclusion that the money flow is very, very less in the hands of the people who are in the what you call the vulnerable group people. So that means what the government is supposed to do is that they have to transfer, direct cash transfers should have been given to them, so that the money flow will be more and people may be able to increase their buying capacity. So that is very, very essential. Then example, in COVID-19 situation, I have given in what happened in Canada, so that it will be easy for us to understand. In COVID-19 situation in Canada, migrants working in agricultural sectors are now able to obtain pay protection, and they are also eligible for employment insurance. And Qatar has stated that migrant workers who are in quarantine or undergoing medical treatment will receive their full salaries from their employers. Here, I have to acknowledge the governments that they have given some special leave for COVID-19. And this 100%, I mean, that is for the organized, of course. And but for the migrant, we are not very sure whether they have been given salary, they have lost their livelihood. That means it goes without saying that they were not given any of these kind of help. Then the very important point which we discussed previous slide also, mobilizing resources for social protection. That is the fourth important role a welfare state can play. So here you have to understand a challenging financial situation for the government too. So most governments needs to urgently increase health and social protection expenditure, while at the same time revenues from taxes and social security contributions have sharply declined, putting additional pressure on national budgets. This has been quoted by ILO also in the year 2020, last year. So we understand that the governments are also stressed financially, and they are also having a lot of crisis, financial crisis. But how they can, play a role, important role they can play for a welfare state is that in the immediate crisis context, domestic resource mobilization has included reprioritizing public spending. So prioritizing already would have taken place, reprioritizing public spending for which they need to spend first, how much they need to spend, whether to be increased this particular head or not. So reprioritizing public spending is essential. Tapping into fiscal reserves. So, of course, we are all known during the last 1 year the amount which has been with the RBI for reserving or in the which is in the reserve. So maybe for this kind of a pandemic period, it is the role of a government to tap the resources from the reserves also. Then relaxing fiscal deficit rules and increasing borrowing levels. Of course, the government has taken an initiative to increase the borrowing. The banks were given additional permissions or a kind of a, what I could say, that they were given information or instructions that they can increase their level of borrowing. But a very unfortunate, once again, what happened is it was all in the policy level. Whether it has come into reality, that is again a question mark. And as social workers, it is our duty to check whether whatever the policies has been made and that whether that has been successfully implemented at the lower level, whether the top-down approach has been properly followed or not, that we have to check. Then enabling more accommodative macroeconomic conditions in general, and requesting external financial support. That is also a very important point that we need to understand. It is not a problem that getting money. So it is like maintaining a family. When we are in crisis and we don't have much financial resources, then immediately probably we will maybe asking a loan from various sources. If we are affordable, maybe from the banks or from the neighbors or something like that. So it is the government which has to take care of the people of their or the citizens of the country. Hence, they are in the need to do all these kind of activities. And what was the reality? You all have to check. And welfare, the fifth one. So a welfare state should ensure food security. So you all would have known about this SDG, zero hunger. So ensuring food for all should be of utmost priority. And strengthening the public distribution system. And we have to acknowledge the government of Tamil Nadu and also the system which has been already in practice, that this public distribution system is very strong in Tamil Nadu. So that way I have to acknowledge that the strengthening the public distribution system will definitely play an important role for its citizens, for helping the people to get their the, items or whatever the things that has been distributed through this fair shops, fair price shops. And digitalization of beneficiary lists, and or in some instances their linkage with Aadhaar should permit actions necessary for portability of PDS benefits for migrant workers, and with special reference to women and children. So by this PDS, we could monitor whether that the zero hunger or the goal of SDG zero hunger or the food security of every individual in this whole country is not solved. So that is a very, very important, and we should give utmost priority to this particular one. And then the sixth one, ensuring education. In the left hand side, you could see online learning is really India ready, that we need to check again. And the status of migrants children, and especially adolescent girls. So there was a question for the previous speaker also. I was also listening. So the problems of adolescent migrant children, it is very saddening that we have to understand, or we have to acknowledge the enormous problems undergoing by the adolescent children, and especially adolescent girls, since that is the age of transformation from a childhood to adulthood and attaining puberty and other things. You have to understand the problems undergoing by adolescent girls. And the states has to include migrant children in SSA, that means Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, that guarantees education to all and provide educational facilities to them like any other students, especially during and post COVID-19 situation. So the Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, that is actually guaranteeing education to all, and they have to take necessary steps to include the people from, especially the children from migrant parents or migrants, and especially in these situations during and post COVID is very much essential. And states like Tamil Nadu has opened Kalvi TV so that the government school students can get benefited. These children were given a separate channel. Tamil Nadu has taken an initiative to telecast lessons in Kalvi TV. It's a government channel where the students are given education. In the sense, they were taught lessons through that particular channel. But whether it reaches the migrant children as well, that is again a question mark. And once if we talk about the online learning, we can have a day full of discussions or debates can be conducted to understand the advantages and disadvantages of online learning. And next important role, what we can do as a welfare state, what the country or the governance could be focused is that support for women-owned and led businesses. So businesses owned and led by migrant women should receive specific grants and stimulus funding, as well as subsidized and state-backed loans that should be given. And of course, women who are in self-help group women, they are getting this particular help or particular assistance from the government. The same thing should be considered for the migrant women also. And economic relief should similarly target sectors and industries where migrant women are a large proportion of workers. So there we can get the data and we can definitely help them. So economic relief is possible when we target the sectors, especially I could say that construction sector or the hotel industries. So or any other sector for that matter, wherever you could see the migrant women, and wherever they are comprises of a large proportion of workers, probably we can consider those sectors and we can get data and then we can give them the economic relief. And the tax burden should be eased, and where possible, government should source food, personal protection equipment, and other essential supplies from migrant women-led businesses. So all that is possible once the policies are made properly. And then welfare state, what is the next step the government could have thought of is that ensuring the rights of women migrant workers. So a welfare state should ensure the rights of the women migrant workers irrespective of their migration status in compliance with international law. So this is according to the ILO conventions already has happened, and they have ensured that it should be the rights of the women migrant workers should be complied. But unfortunately, it's still a question mark. Then ensuring long-term policy responses. So it should be developed, and here you can see the picture, migrant women who are disabled. So ensuring inclusiveness is also very much important. So in the long-term policy responses, how it could be considered is that first point may be a national social dialogue. then national social protection strategies, policies, legal frameworks, and effective administrative systems that are inclusive of migrant workers and their families and based on the equality of treatment principle. So this should be considered. This is one important one, and it is essential. Then ensuring that social protection policies are coordinated with other policies, including employment, migration, and other relevant policies. So policies, once again, it should include employment, migration, and other relevant policies. Then the scope of social protection schemes, whether it is contributory and non-contributory, it should be extended to cover even migrant workers in the informal economy, in the sense unorganized sector, and facilitate their transition to the formal economy in the longer term. And then the last but not the least, they ensure the portability of social security benefits. So that should be ensured. So all this would really help them to have the long-term policy responses for them, which definitely will help them in the years coming. Next, if you see, what is the National Commission for Women and advisory for them is that recognizing the multi-dimensional vulnerability of internal women migrants, on 7th April 2020, there was advisory given by National Commission for Women, and they have stated that to take appropriate measures to address the needs of the internal women migrants during COVID-19 lockdown. So National Commission for Women 2020 has identified the needs that are gender responsive and inclusive. First one, food. So the migrant women should be at any cost to go without starving. So that means they should be given food. Second one, shelter and accommodation. So ensuring them a safe shelter. Shelter is very, very important. Then the third important one, safety and security. So once again, that is very, very important, and that too from gender-based violence. And health, needless to say, and that too during pandemic health condition, how it has been deteriorated and how we need to concentrate and to increase their health status is important. And above all, the next point is mental health. Very, very important. You all could have seen that they were in precarious jobs, very much insecure, lot of uncertainties in their daily life. That means they have lost their jobs, no income, no money, and then no food, no stay, proper stay, and everything is a problem. So we can understand their status of mental health during that. And the next one, important one, is hygiene. So including the personal hygiene, if you take it into consideration, they were suffering so much, and that is why they have given an advisory that all these things to be considered properly. Okay, so to conclude, I could say that women migrant workers make important contribution to societies and economies and hold essential jobs in the current crisis too. And nonetheless, women migrant workers continue to suffer from a lack of adequate and comprehensive social protection. So please understand, not even adequacy is there, including the fullest form of social protection, that means comprehensive. In that context, ensuring adequate health and safety at workplace and access to social protection for all workers and including women migrant workers is fundamental according to ILO 2020. Maybe that we will keep it in our mind, while as a social worker or any person belonging to social science, we have to understand the plight of migrant workers and especially women migrant workers and their health condition, family, children, and their health conditions, including reproductive health, everything taking into consideration the all spheres of the problems and vulnerabilities of women. There are a lot of challenges, and at the same time, there are many roles the welfare state could play, and that has to be given properly, maybe at all our levels, as a student, as a faculty, as a general public, whatever the contribution we can make to increase or to ensure the social protection rights of the migrant women, that we will all will take up, and maybe we will help them to have a decent and their rightful life. Thank you, and I stop here, and I would be happy to answer your queries if you have. And at the end note, I just thank once again Dr. Arakaraj, Dr. Selvam, Dr. Father Andrews, and every one of the faculty members who are organizing this wonderful conference and who have given me this opportunity to present my thoughts with you all. So thank you so much. Now over to Dr. Arikraj and Dr. Selvam.
Thank you, ma'am, for broadening us with the role of welfare state on women migrant workers. It really enhanced our knowledge about the women migrant workers. Now over to Arukiraj, sir.
It was a very, very insightful session, and a lot of things you presented. What this welfare state can do, and what they are doing already, what they should do. Here, I would like to take few questions. What are the role of government regarding caring for the children of migrant workers? That's a question. Would you like to give some more insight, madam? Madam, you got my question?
Sir, I'm unable to hear you. I don't
Yeah.
some problem
Can,
with my audio system here. I changed my microphone also.
now can you hear me?
Some problem.
Now
So
can you hear me?
write it in the chat box. I'll be able to.
Yeah. I'll just put it in the chat box. Yes.
What is the role of government in caring for the children of migrants? So we need to explore a lot because the fact might be shocking to us. Really, as I have already mentioned, there was no clear-cut role of the government to give some sort of solace or some sort of caring for the children of migrants. Though there were a lot of advisory being given by the government, still the migrants, we all have witnessed that they were traveling or they were walking on the roads to carrying their belongings with the children from one state to another state, including we have seen people traveling from Delhi, the capital of our country, to their own states. So much of people, they were walking, and we were all witnessing that. But unfortunately, whether the government has clearly advised anything about the caring of children I don't find anything very specifically. Probably we all need to explore. As far as I'm concerned, I would say that there is no such uh, mm, care from the government, but they should have given. So now I understand the question, what should be the role of a government in caring for the children? As I said already, the educational needs of the children should have been taken care by incorporating them or by including them in the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan program or any nearby schools or through online, which is again a question mark. So even nowadays, the children, those who are in the regular mode also, they are finding a problem. Hence, the government should have given health aspect. They should have taken care of the health of the children, and then probably the food security that should have been given to the young children. Nutritional aspects should have been covered, and above all, social protection for a safe shelter and other things could have been concentrated. Maybe this kind of these kind of seminars will help them at least policy changes in the future, so that when definitely we should not experience any more pandemic. But still, I say, if at all, if there is anything, the government should be in a position to explain that these are all the factors which we have to take care while we are addressing or while we are taking care of the children, adolescents, women, elderly, disabled, and every weaker section of the society. Okay, are there any insight regarding the education of children of migrants in NEP? As far as I am concerned, the NEP has not specifically mentioned about migrant children. So the focus was on generally the children, but the specific, consideration of migrants children is missing, I hope. And anything else I have missed? Okay. Any other questions? Probably you can, yeah. Some problem with my audio. Yeah. Please put it in the chat box so that I can answer. I'm not able to hear you all.
Hello, madam. You have one more question. Are there anything related to the education of children in the NEP, new education policy? Any idea you would like to give?
Sir, once again, now
Is there anything said about the children, the education of children of migrants in NEP, new education policy?
that is why I mentioned that as far as my knowledge goes, there is no specific mention of migrant children as it is. But we need to discuss, or we need to peruse it once again in detail about this inclusion of migrant children. I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer that very specifically. How easy?
There is one more.
Yeah, I saw the question. Is that one you are referring, Dr. Sairaj?
Yes, madam. Yes.
How easy it is for the migrant women to use the government mechanism to ensure their safety and protection? A wonderful question. With a very positive note, I can tell you that all women, and especially the women who are migrants and also who are very much vulnerable in their status, they have to get the accessibility to go to the government for any kind of a help, and that too taking care of their own safety and protection. But still, the government, they have to approach and they have to get help from the government. And I think there are a lot of students and other friends from Kerala where they are doing wonderfully fine. There are a lot of systems available with the government. They can very well reach the government and they can get the safety and also the protection for any kind of help from the government mechanism. That is happening. So same models, similar models could be practiced in other states also. And there is one person answered the previous question. NEP does mention about covering and facilitating for education of the children of migrants. Yeah. So yeah, that I agree. So that has been considered. So I'm quite happy about it. And any
I think there is no other question in YouTube. There are quite a number of people attending.
Okay.
So it was a very informative session, and I know how much you prepared for this session. You organized it really well, and that gave a very good clarity about the topic, madam. Over to.
Thank you, sir. The feedback link has been shared in the chat box and also in YouTube. So kindly fill it and submit it. Finally, I call upon Brother Madan to propose a vote of thanks.
A very good evening to one and all present here for the webinar. I am V. Madan on behalf of PG and Research Social Work Department. I am here to present the vote of thanks for today's webinar. First of all, I spread my most sincere thanks to the Lord God for giving us wonderful time to know about scope and challenges of women migrant workers. I also take this opportunity to thank our guest webinar speakers, Dr. P. Sivakumar, Dr. Lavalina Littleflower, who gave their vital time for the busy schedule to grace this meeting and enlightening us with the knowledge. I thank Reverend Dr. John Alex, Secretary of Sacred Heart College, for the welcome address. I also thank Father Francis Bosco, SDB, Director, Bosco Migrant Service, Chennai, for inaugural address. I also take this opportunity to thank K. Aragiraj, webinar convener, for briefing about the webinar topic. I would like to thank the faculty members, Dr. Clayton and Dr. Silvam, who introduced our guest webinar speakers. I also take this opportunity to thank our principal and HOD, Father Andrews Raja, for their support. I'm happy to thank the MC of the day, Jabba Jennifer. At the end, I also thank all the students for taking very active participation in this webinar. Thank you one and all.
So dear participants, thank you so much. The day one webinar ends here with a lot of input from two speakers and a session by Francis Bosco from the inaugural address. And looking forward to your participation tomorrow at the same time, 2:30. Three speakers are going to address, and it will be a very insightful session, and we will meet you tomorrow. Do not forget to fill the feedback form, which we will take it for generating e-certificate. Thank you so much. For any clarifications, you can contact me. I can just text my phone number, though it is in the program schedule. Thank you so much. We conclude this session today. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Once you fill the feedback form, you can leave the session.